Hello everyone, my name is Leo, for those of you who don't know. For those of you who've been watching our channel for a while, you know that that Heather and I we're kind of on a little quest. We've undertaken a little quest to uncover and bring to light a lot of these old stories from around our region and beyond that that really deserve to be retold. And it might be, some of them may be famous people who did extraordinary things. Some of them will be people like you and I who had extraordinary things happen to them, and sometimes there were tragic outcome to a lot of these stories, and today is one of those. To be honest, stories like these are kind of hard to tell. You know, to be honest, I really don't see how some YouTubers can just shut down, you know, like a robot, and just tell the story. In a way, I admire them, but in another way, I don't know. Anyway, I'll do my best, and I ask y'all to bear with me. I am in Holden, West Virginia today on 22 Mine Road, not far from a spot where we did another story about Mamie Thurman. And it's called 22 Mine Road because there's a bunch of coal mines out this way. It was coal camps, that sort of thing back in the day, then strip mines and cleared the top of the mountain off, and now it is a really big industrial park back up here on top of the mountains in southern West Virginia, just like I said, just outside of Holden. And there is something else here. This is why we came here today, to tell you this story. Look at that. Now, since the very beginning of coal mining, workers learned to get used to the idea of coal miners losing limbs, broken backs, and countless other work-related injuries and countless deaths. But strong unionization, along with state and federal mining laws, as corrupt as they sometimes were, have made mining less hazardous, despite the diseases of black lung and silicosis slowly taking their tolls on everyone involved. If everything goes well and you have a long and illustrious career underground in the coal mine without ever getting hurt, one of those will still kill you in the end. Until the number 22 coal mine disaster on March 8th, 1960. It had been 23 years since so many lives were lost in a single mine tragedy here in Logan County, West Virginia. It was also in the month of March in 1937 that 18 men died in an explosion at the Macbeth mine owned by Hutchinson Coal Company on Rum Creek. In more recent years, prior to the Holden incident, 6 men had become fatalities on February 12th in 1958 at the Lundale mine of Amherst Coal Company. This incident killed 5 workers instantly and sent another one to the hospital where he later died. When word reached the families of the men at Rum Creek that an explosion had occurred and that men could still be trapped alive underground, experiencing a fiery hellscape that, quite frankly, none of us can probably even imagine. I'll let the truck pass. Wives, mothers, and other family members quickly got to the mine and waited for days, only to have those worst case thoughts confirmed. How the mine victims met their deaths were vastly different from one mine to the other. While workers were crushed at Lundale, it is reported that rescue workers removed the remains of charred and burned men from the Rum Creek mine. If there is any solace to be found in coal mine related deaths, perhaps the entombed men who perished at the number 22 site in Holden provided that by at least dying peacefully of asphyxiation. When the men were finally located, some 2,400 feet from the entrance, all were reported to be in a somewhat natural position for men working underground. The tasteless, odorless carbon monoxide gas had gradually taken all of their lives, one by one. 8 days after the fire began, rescue workers came upon 13 bodies. All had died within hours after the accident of carbon monoxide gas. None of the bodies were burned, and the men appeared to have been relaxed when death made its silent approach. 2 men were eating from their lunch buckets. 1 man was found in a kneeling position with his arms around a timber and was apparently in the act of praying when he too was overcome by the deadly gas. Josh Chafin Jr. of Pine Creek seems to have known what was happening and was found still clutching a note that he had written to his wife. The note was delivered to his wife 12 hours before the first body was brought to the surface. The note read, "Mabel, I love you. I love you more than you will ever know. Take care of the kids and raise them to serve the Lord." It was signed Junior, the name he went by. Josh and his wife were members of the Central Baptist Church here on Holden Road. The bodies were wrapped in blankets and plastic bags and carried to the base of a 485-foot elevator shaft, where they were lined up neatly to await their return to the light of day. A heavy wet snowfall covered the ground. The men were taken to the Ferris Funeral Home, which was chosen as a central site where families could claim their family members' bodies and make funeral arrangements. So, what actually happened on Tuesday, March 8th in 1960? We know that the Holden Mine at Island Creek number 22 caught fire in the coal seam, and it created a carbon monoxide gas which killed 18 men by asphyxiation. The men were trapped shortly after entering the mine at 7 in the morning. The last word came from them about 8:30 that morning, shortly before the telephone lines to the surface burned. 20 men went into the Holden Mine on that snowy March morning. Not long after work began, a slate fall occurred in the tunnels between the men and the bottom of the shaft to get back out. Officials blamed the fire on a cable or trolley line which was suspected to have been knocked down near a wooden temper that arced until the wood caught on fire. The coal then caught on fire, causing a raging inferno to roar through the tunnels inside the coal mine. The men were sealed off from the fire by the slate fall. Rescue workers poured water into the mine using 12 different water hoses, but freezing temperatures soon froze the lines on the surface. Finally, when the fire was contained, teams of 40 men working around the clock slogged through knee-deep water in the smoke and steam, hoping to rescue any survivors they could find. Veteran rescue workers called it a hellfire scene. Ventilation expert Willis Carter, who was one of the trapped miners, volunteered to crawl through a narrow passageway to try to find a way out. A young miner named Kyle Blair agreed to go with him. The others decided to wait for the firefighters and the rescue team. Carter said that Blair blacked out about 25 minutes as they were crawling toward the surface. After that, Carter's repeated remarks and encouragement kept Blair moving through a circular route in the old mine workings. When they finally reached safety, Blair said he remembered very little of their 4-hour ordeal, except that Willis kept talking to him, keeping him going. If everyone had followed Willis, things might have been different that day. This particular March had proven to be an abundantly snowy month, with 20 inches of snow on March 3rd. Snowy roads and frigid conditions hampered over 200 people's efforts at the coal mine site, where makeshift shelters for volunteers and rescue workers had to be provided. When word came that the first 12 bodies had been found, it was said that tired work crews stood silently warming themselves by outdoor stoves, staring quietly into the flames. Some of the women wearing Salvation Army bonnets were at the site. They, like others, had been part of a soup kitchen staff that helped feed the rescue workers and family members as they lived out a nightmare scenario in real life. It was reported that when the last body was brought up via the 480-foot elevator shaft, the snow stopped, as if it had just been turned off. Longtime Logan Judge C.C. Chambers announced that he had received more than $1,000 from various parts of the tri-state area to be dispersed equally among the victims' families. People were sad, but in reality, that was all they could do. It took 9 days to recover the bodies. 72 children were now fatherless, and 16 wives had been made widows by the mine disaster. Ironically, Kyle Blair, who escaped death at Island Creek No. 22 mine disaster, died tragically in another mining accident not long after, in 1974. He had worked his way up to mine foreman on a tipple at a Boone County mine when he fell into a coal crusher. Today, we will visit Kyle, who it just seems couldn't escape the coal mine's icy death grip. One way or another, the coal mine always wins in the end. Now, before we head out, I just wanted to actually show you guys the memorial here, and it sits all by itself way back here on top of this mountain. You're not too far from where the old coal mine was, but it says dedicated to the memory of the following 18 men who lost their lives in the Island Creek Coal Company No. 22 mine disaster on March 8, 1960 at Holden, West Virginia. And here's a list of all the names. Dedicated to the Holden 22 Coal Camp community, Holden 22 Miners Memorial Fund. Something about that I wanted to show you guys. And you've heard, I'm sure you've heard a lot about coal camps over the years, and if you've watched our channel, you've seen a few. But I want to share something with you guys that you might not expect. Typically, they're looked at, coal camps were living hell. It was an awful place where you were insanely broke, you were starving half the time, you were freezing in the winter, you had no means to do anything. But some of the coal camps themselves were communities, all on their own, all by themselves. And I want to read some of this to you guys. It's kind of long, so I'll get close and, well, let's just see. This is actually pretty interesting. You guys will probably like this. Holden 22 Coal Mine on Pine Creek began operation around 1920 by Island Creek Coal Company in Logan County, West Virginia. The nearest community hospital was in Holden, West Virginia, 8 miles over 22 Mountain this way. The company built 100 structures consisting of single, duplex, and 3 boarding houses for housing 145 families. Other buildings included a company store with a butcher shop and gasoline pumps, 4-room schoolhouse, doctor's office, post office, barber shop, Free Will Baptist Church, Boy and Girl Scout cabins, garages, water tower, water plant, and pump house. For recreation, there was the double 2 movie theater, pool room, ice cream corner shop, and a ball field. Also used as a supervised playground in the summer and swings in various areas of the camp. Coal miners from a number of other countries came to work at 22, bringing their own languages, customs, and religions. All were respected and cared about no matter their differences. Being raised among and exposed to such a variety of cultures, we developed few prejudices. Island Creek Coal Company provided jobs, a great social and civil structure, and maintained the coal camp homes and infrastructure of the community. The coal camp was divided by camps. Lower camp houses, along with 3 boarding houses, were between the coal mine and the theater. Middle camp houses were above the theater and below the church. Upper camp was above the church to the schoolhouse hollow and on Laurel Road going toward 22 Mountain. Everything was in walking distance. Students from 1st to 6th grade walked to Schoolhouse Hollow. Students from 7th to 12th grades rode the school bus over 22 Mine either to Holden Junior High, 7 to 9 grades, or Logan High in the city of Logan. On March 8, 1960, this is the incident we're here for, 18 coal miners were killed in a tragic fire explosion at the Holden 22 Mine. In 1962, this led slowly to the closing and demolition of the 22 Holden Coal Camp, and nothing was left by 1966. As of 2020, coal is still being mined here on 22 Mine Road. This tragedy affected the coal camp community in the entire state of West Virginia. It was a grief that never died, but served to unite the coal camp in a bond so tight that they met for 50 years. The Holden 22 reunion started in 1962, held on the second Sunday in June at the Chief Logan State Park, and ended in 2012. It took 56 years for the Holden 22 Miner Memorial Monument to be built and erected at this site, and was dedicated on September 10th, 2016, in memory and honor of those miners who were our neighbors and friends. 72 children were left fatherless, and 16 wives became widows. All of our fathers were special because it takes a special breed of people to be coal miners. It's a brotherhood. Over 300 attended the Miners' Memorial dedication. Gone but not forgotten. Holden 22 community was the best and happiest time of life for those who were born there, worked there, lived there, and grew up, struggled and succeeded because of our coal camp heart for caring for one another, and how our fathers took pride and dignity in working in the coal mines. The bonds of friendship and love was everlasting. It was a safe and clean community, and everyone cared about and knew each other. We lived in a protected, gated coal camp mountain community and didn't realize it. And if we were poor, we didn't know it. Relate to that. Holden 22 coal camp brought us up in the age of innocence and homegrown, which made us who we are today. And for many, it was the best of times. Wow. Quite a story, isn't it? Alright, we're going to head out here in a second, and we're going to run up to another little place called Harts, West Virginia. And there's a Brumfield cemetery up that way. We're going to go and see if we can't find young Kyle, the man who escaped this tragedy only to be killed a few years later, also in a coal mine. We'll see you guys there. Okay, now this is the little community of Harts, West Virginia. And yes, if you're curious, I am in the center of town, as a matter of fact. Dead center, to be specific. The bridge right there is the geographical center of town. So yeah, I am right in town. I stopped here for a good reason. If our research is correct, one of the old graveyards that I'm looking for, I'm after two over here, one of them is right back up this hill here. And I went in the restaurant, and found the owner. Very busy, beautiful, unbelievably delicious looking sweets in there. Really nice little place. But I spoke to Dana, the owner, and told her who I was and what I was doing, and that I was out here looking for an old graveyard that I suspected was right behind their restaurant on that hill right there somewhere. She looks at me and she says, yeah, there's a graveyard up there. Ha! She said, it's an old one. So I do believe, guys, I do believe we have found this old gravesite. And there's only one way to find out from here, though. As you've been watching, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know what comes next. It's time for Leo to go climb another mountain and go find this old graveyard. But that's what we're here for, is to find these old stories and bring these stories back to life, to tell these old tales that really truly do deserve to be told. And I'll just be honest, all the way up through here I was kind of thinking about that note that I read to you guys earlier to Mabel. And just for a second, I'd like you guys to imagine something now. He's in this mine and he knows that he's going to die any minute now. There's this little scrap of paper in his pocket that was just a worthless piece of paper a minute ago. But now that he has just a few minutes to live, he scribbles out this note to his wife Mabel. I love you more than you'll ever know, and to please raise the children, you know, to be Christian for Jesus, that sort of thing, right? Now at this point he makes a point to clutch this note as he's dying, so that it is readily available on his chest, so that it will be found for sure. Okay, at this point this little piece of paper is most likely the most important thing in this man's life, protecting this little note, the last words, his very last words to his wife and children. Right? Now imagine the significance of that little scrap of paper now. And not only that, imagine for a second, imagine Mabel when she opened that note and it had her husband's coal-stained fingerprints on that note. And when she opened it and read it, you know that note had to land like a bomb. And it's just the little things like that, you know, when I leave out here on these trips, on these little quests to go find these things, you know, you leave the house, I've mentioned this before, you leave the house with certain preconceived notions. You know what happened, you know, you think you know where, you know, that's the point of going to look for it. You think you know where, you think you know the story, but then when you get out here and start doing it, something like that jumps out at you and you realize the gravity of the situation, how important this was at the time, right? How important at that time that little piece of paper was to Mabel. That was probably the most important thing in the world to her at that time. So that's why we're on our little mission, I suppose, to go find all these places. I see graveyard. To go find all these places and tell you guys all these stories. It's kind of ironic, I guess, that it's called YouTube, because it's the story of you and me. You know, we do on occasion, we'll do the famous person, we'll do a story about the famous person that did something, but most of the time it's stories about you and me, about us. And I do believe it looks as though I have found the graveyard I'm looking for, one of them anyway. I think I know where the other one is too. But I'm going to shut my camera down, catch my breath, look around a little bit, and get ready to tell you guys the rest of the story. Well, guess what? Did a little bit of research, walked around a little bit up here, and look who I found. Guys, meet Kyle Blair. This is the gentleman that I was telling you about that crawled out of the coal mine. This is one of them. Now, like I was telling you earlier about the note, to imagine, just imagine Kyle here, what he went through, crawling out of that exploded coal mine, the smoke and soot, carbon monoxide gases, passed out for at least 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and was encouraged to keep going by a friend. He made it out of the coal mine, only to die a few years later in 1974 in another coal-related accident at a coal temple that I mentioned earlier. Now, as far as Kyle, Kyle is shown as working already at the mines at 18 years old. So this was what he knew and was what he was comfortable with. Kyle was the son of Jesse Blair and Melvin or Merlin Salyers. It's spelled differently on different documents. She was 19 and Jesse was 32 when Kyle was born. He was at least one of at least 4 siblings. He eventually married Anna Jean Brumfield here, which is how he wound up here in the Brumfield Cemetery. Now, the Brumfields were famous in their own right for the Lincoln County feud, which is the second most famous feud in West Virginia behind the Hatfield and McCoy feud. And it's been called the Lincoln County War, the Brumfield-McCoy feud, and many other names. But that's another story that I will be doing right here just as soon as I finish with this equally important story. Anyway, I guess since we found Kyle, I guess this is about as far as we can go. You know, we can't bring Kyle back. We can't make Anna's life any better. We can't reduce the trauma that this caused when it happened. But we can recant this story. We can tell you guys about it. We can take you to the places and show you the sights. And I think that's part of our little mission, Heather and I. I mean, y'all know we're a little mom and pop, but I think Heather makes it look pretty professional myself when she gets done. But it's an amazing story, tragic loss, an entire community affected. I mean, it's not just the orphans and the widows. I mean, they're obviously affected the most by these tragedies, but there's aunts, there's uncles, there's cousins, there's grandparents. There's all sorts of people who are affected when a loved one dies young, especially doing a really dangerous job. Anyway, guys, very much appreciate you guys for coming along, for supporting our channel, for watching today. We appreciate all of you guys. Great big thank you from Heather and I, and we hope you've enjoyed our little story today. As tragic as it was, it should be remembered. Stories like these should be told for obvious reasons. Anyway, you guys have a really good day, and thank you for watching. This is Leo with the Hillbilly Files. Leo out.